U.S. Army vet. He's a police officer. He was a police officer with the Village of New Hartford. He was a campus police officer at SUNY Geneseo. He was a lieutenant campus police officer for SUNY Upper Division Utica, and he worked as a private insurance adjuster. Mr. Corr has a very poignant story, and please listen to this, and it's a very, very powerful message. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here with all of my friends and my proud gun owners. Recently, I had contacted the governor's office, and after exchange, I wrote essentially what follows. I told the governor I wanted to get a short message through as to how I felt and a lot of others feel on the recent gun bill. I'd agree to call it the SAFE Act if I thought there was any possibility that it would make New York any safer, but I know it won't. Except for the provision for the mental health, if properly implemented, I do agree with stiffer penalties for the illegal straw purchases. I want to mention, to give a little history, is last night we remembered my son, Officer Joseph D. Corr, who was killed in the line of duty 7 years ago last night. He responded to a jewelry store robbery in New Hartford outside of Utica. He and another officer arrived just before 2 of the 4 robbers were going to shoot one of the clerks, a petite young lady, about 100 pounds. They ran when the police pulled up. My son was involved with a high-speed chase. My son was involved with a high-speed chase that ended when they crashed the car and took off on foot. One headed for the wood line where my son gave chase but was ambushed and shot and killed. I want to add the subsequent work done by the various police agencies was amazing, and I can't say enough good things about all of them. But here's the real story. The 4 people involved in the robbery and murder were long-time criminals that collectively had over 100 felony arrests, over 100. And here they are on the streets, doing what they do best. In the case of one person who actually shot my son, while only 30 years old at the time of the New Hartford robbery, he already had a prior murder. About 10 years before, he was charged with murder in the first degree in a drive-by shooting in which an innocent 16-year-old girl was killed. Although charged with murder in the first degree, he plea bargained down to assault first, served 2.5 years.
Blinded.
When the marshals caught up with him, he shot and hit one of them, fortunately in the vest, but he was quickly killed by the police. Using now what is probably all illegal weapons. I want to mention briefly when the marshals caught up with him and they killed him, that they found out that the particular gun he was using was used in a homicide in Delaware a few months before to kill an individual that supposedly owed money to one of the 4. That charge has never formally been made. One of the perpetrators, after being caught at the scene, had recently been released on bail for a burglary charge. He'd been out of prison for 4 months, but been able to be arrested for burglary, and then, of course, made bail. The court in Philadelphia did not even know he was arrested for robbery, murder in New Hartford until several months later. During the follow-up investigation, it showed he was on parole from Washington State. Of course, they forgot to check in Washington and see that he was also on probation for a series of charges in Hawaii. When the parole officer in Washington was called, her response to investigators was, "We were wondering where he was." 2 years plus later, and they were wondering where he was. Guess what he was doing? This is all amazing to me as a former cop. Another point was the fact that 2 of the individuals had robbery warrants out for them for New Jersey at the time of the New Hartford robbery and murder. I've had 2 of the New Jersey officers personally apologize to me and the family for not having been more aggressive in getting them served and taken into custody. It was not until a month or 2 after the murder that they arrested 2 for the New Jersey robbery. Finally, the guns. The person who supplied them with the guns made illegal straw purchases. He had no prior record, but only put 14 guns in the hands of various gangbangers, for lack of a better term. By the way, the last that I'd heard, 7 of the guns have been recovered at various crime scenes. Under the federal law, criminal record, he may have spent virtually no time in jail. I was told months. Since we went to PA, he got nearly 4 years after we made numerous impact statements. What the real problem here is not the number of rounds in a magazine or the gun. I don't blame Glock or Smith & Wesson. It is always the person who pulls the trigger. I would hope that the governor and others would get it straight. Punish the people who commit the violent crimes. Punish them. It seems stupid to say, but that's the problem. Lock them up and don't turn them loose. That will have an impact, making 1.2 million law-abiding New York citizens criminals because they have 10, 20, or 30 rounds in a magazine is asinine. I'm sorry, Governor, it's asinine. I do put some blame on each and every one of the people who failed, in some cases miserably, to lock up the violent people that have proven their violent nature through their own actions. If we'd enforced the laws already on the books, none of the individuals would have been on the street. So Governor, let's enforce the current laws. I've often wished that any one of my friends or legally licensed concealed weapon holders had been there on that night and saw the 2 running with a gun and the police chasing after them. It may well have turned out differently. I have far more faith in them and than the overall overworked and underfunded criminal justice system. Governor, the need is for resources for getting the real criminals off the street and locked up, not wasting our resources on keeping track of how many shotgun shells I buy, how many rounds I may have in a magazine, and penalizing the legal gun owners to score political points. Governor, repeal